And that's officially ended on YouTube now. And so you are live. You can go ahead.
Hi, I'm RJ, the story guy, and today for my reading, I'm going to be reading from my most recent book called Dragon Train. You can see the cover art behind me. And as you can see, it involves a big blue dragon and a young man there on the front of the train. I'm really not going to say any more about it because what I'm going to do is read the first chapter for you, and that should give you a good introduction to the characters, the basic plot situation, the setting, and so on. So without further ado, I'll start. This is chapter 1 called Face to Face from the book Dragon Train. I don't remember the eastbound Dragon Train ever stopping in Hilltop. Grown-ups around here say it never happened in their lifetimes. Oh, maybe Grandma Kesterson might have seen it, but she's nearly 100 years old and can barely recall what she did 5 minutes ago. But that didn't matter when I walked out of the barn. I had just finished milking all but the last 2 cows in our herd like 1,000 times before. I carried the bucket of warm milk steaming in the cold morning air. That's when the sound of the dragon's deep breathing reached my ears. I looked across the long stretch from our farm on the ridge toward Hilltop. The Dragon Train was climbing to the top of Long Hill just before passing through town. Nothing new about that. But this morning, those dragon puffs were loud, sounding like Grandma hacking and coughing while she smoked a hand-rolled cigarette. That got my attention. I watched as the train appeared outside of town. The train was barely moving. The dragon dipped low, plowing dirt and gravel as it strained to flap its big wings. Usually the train picked up speed when the dragon screeched as if relieved the hard work was done. Heading on down from Dinky Hilltop to the big city of Portville, it was an easy coast from the hills. But this faded old blue dragon could barely manage a wheezy cough as the train lost speed. When I saw the Dragon Train slowing, I completely forgot what I was doing and dashed for the train station in the center of Hilltop. I ran across our yard, passed over our little wooden house, and toward the stone fence that marked the border between us and our neighbors. Wait a minute. Oh, as I climbed over the fence, something occurred to me. I looked back at the barn door. The milk bucket that I had just been carrying in my hand was now turned over on the ground. Ugh. Dad'll give me what for when he finds a big puddle of fresh milk on the cold ground between the barn and our shack. No time for that. As I turned to head down the hill, I instinctively slapped my left hip, checking to make sure I had my leather pouch with a skinning knife, an ancient leather cord slingshot, and smooth river rocks. None. I turned back to the barn. I had to make time to get the pouch because I might have to sling a rock between that dragon's eyes if he got out of line. Yeah, right, whatever. Still, I felt better prepared with my farmer boy weapons. I tore down the hill's narrow pathways and cut through the barren gardens. Pretty sure our neighbors wouldn't mind since it was time for spring planting. And if they did mind, well, a dragon train stopping here. My only chance to see a real dragon up close. Not from way up on the valley's ridge when they flash by in a few moments, looking more like a flying squirrel pulling a train of wooden toy cars. Reaching the creek, I let gravity speed my flying feet as I leaped across the water and landed a foot short of the opposite bank. Oh man, the cold water went right through my worn out boots. The icy bite hurt, but I didn't care. At the bottom of the hill, I ran across the village square, around the broken down train station, and bounded up the creaking steps. I looked up the tracks. Sure enough, the dragon train limped along, The large blue beast flew a few feet above the tracks as it weaved back and forth, straining to pull the train another 100 yards to the loading platform. I knew it. The train was going to stop in Hilltop. If it didn't stop, the great beast would die before reaching our poor train station. Delivering mail was the only thing our station was good for long before I was born. The beat-up leather mail bags were left off and picked up from giant hooks that stood by the station. The trains barely slowed as one bag from the train caught on the incoming hook, and on the other side of the train car, the outgoing bag was unhooked and carried off as the train sped for Portville. Just as the blue beast's ribs heaved to draw in fresh, cold air, the dragon collapsed on the tracks. Its wings, spanning wider than the size of my home in Hilltop, settled down like old quilts tossed on a bed. By the size of him, my little river rocks wouldn't do. I needed a rock the size of our old bull's head to bring this beast down. Oh, well. Is he dead? I asked the postman who watched this drama from the edge of the loading platform. Nah, Jaden, not yet. Look at its nostrils, still opening and closing, trying to draw breath, though I don't think it'll be long for this world. I watched the dragon, not more than 5 feet away. The ragged edges of its nostrils came together as the monster sucked in barrels of air and then blew out a stench smelling like rotten eggs. Phew, that's gross, I said. It smells worse than a struck match or my old dog's farts. That's the sulfur in their blood system that used to allow them to spew fire, though this beast couldn't light a hanky with what little air it has left. The old postman shook his head. A waste of a perfectly good dragon, he said, and turned to go back into the station. With a large wooden train cars drawn to a halt behind the fallen beast, a conductor in a wrinkled red coat, black cap, and pants jumped to the ground out of the lead car and ran to the postman. You have to send an emergency message. What do you think I'm doing right now? The postman said. Going to mend my socks? Of course, I'm fixing to scratch a message and send my old pigeon hen to Portville right now. Last time I sent a message was a year ago when the eastbound flew past here with a wheel about ready to fall off the caboose's axles. Oh, the conductor said, a bit flustered. That's fine. Thank you. The postman grumbled and disappeared into the station house. The conductor walked over to the suffering dragon and kicked it in the ribs. You dad blame old fool cow. Can't even pull us down the hills to the city. Now we'll have to cut you loose and let you rot right here in the middle of Hilltop. He groaned and shrugged his shoulders. Turning to the gathering crowd, he announced, when we saw this blamed dragon struggling, I knew we'd thrown it off the cliff back a ways and let her carcass feed the wild animals of the forest. Of course, we couldn't have made it this far without a dragon to pull the train. Sorry, stinking beast. He unbuckled a harness that attached the dragon to the shafts connected to the lead car. I caught sight of the train pilot pacing back and forth in his tiny cab. He flung his dragon whip back and forth like he was killing a snake. Maybe he was aggravated he couldn't flog the blue giant to pull the train just far enough to coast to Portville, 50 long miles away. I couldn't imagine 50 miles when the farthest I'd ever been was 7 miles away from town during hunting season. This is the only time I ever got this near to a train towing dragon, and now all I get is watching this poor old wreck breathe its last. Somehow it just didn't seem right. I jumped off the platform and circled the great beast's head, which was about the size of the kitchen in our house. The dragon's breath smelled even worse and burned my throat. Massive eyes as big as a 10-gallon bucket opened slightly and looked in my direction, though it seemed like it didn't really see me. After a few moments, the eyes widened and a liveliness sparkled, as the dragon must have realized a human was looking into its depths. The dragon sucked in more air than I thought possible for an animal so near death. Then I heard something I never expected. Are you the dragon healer come to lead me to my rest in the caverns of heaven? Or do I deserve no more than the fire pits of hell? Was that the dragon's wheezing voice? Dragons don't talk, but if this one did, it wouldn't sound like a woman, would it? Will I join my father and the mother who tended my eggs, along with all of those of my brothers and sisters? What about my siblings who may be dead? And my darling babies who have never flown? Will I at last curl around my loved ones and rest eternally? Was all I could mumble. What was I supposed to say? Talking dragon? And what in the world was it talking about? Like it was some kind of human facing death and longing for rest in heaven, as if it had a soul. Grown-ups in the crowd started talking all at once. What was that? Did you hear something? No? Well, I heard wheezing and a whispering like someone talking. A woman, I think. What did the voice say and where did it come from? Is it a ghost? Someone asked. And so the questions flew around the crowd. I looked at the dragon and wondered what a dragon would say if it could talk. And if it could, would it talk about heaven of all places? How could a dumb beast only fit for towing trains across the mountains and prairies of Null Land expect to rest in some kind of dragon heaven, or any kind of heaven for that matter? More craziness. But the creature couldn't have spoken. Dragons don't talk. The crowd murmured in a way that was more threatening than the stories about a weir of dragons back in the old days. Back then, my father told me, dragons had not been broken in their wild ways. Now they were used for transportation and war machines. Someone's been messing with us like we're country bumpkins, a voice spat. Old Joel, one of the farmers who lived just a hill away from us, took a long, hard look at the dragon. Maybe that dragon is possessed or something, he said. Yeah, said his wife beside him. Joel, you could be right. The least the beast has done is scare a lot of us folks, making them weird noises. Who cares if it is dying, the village baker said. We need to finish it off, and I could tell by the way the conductor peered into the crowd's faces that he feared violence from the crowd. He turned to face the postman. It's bad enough we have a broken down dead dragon on our hands, and now we've got a riot brewing, he muttered, as if expecting the postman to control the crowd. Don't go looking at me to solve your problems. All your bunch does is whip through our little village, grab our mail, and leave off a few goods we can't find in our sad excuse for a store. As it is, the store owner has to ride a wagon for 5 hard days on rocky roads to get to Portville for essentials twice a year. Quit your complaining. It's not our fault our village is so little, not even worth a stop once a month. This problem is Ewan's, not mine or any of these forsaken souls here. Clean up your own dead dragon mess. The postman glared at the fidgeting conductor, spit on the ground near the trainman's black polished shoes, and headed for the crowd, through the crowd, to his cramped post office. Over his shoulder, the postman snarled, I'll go send your gall-darn message while you cool your heels back in your comfy office on the train. It's about time, the conductor said. Tell them that blamed number 4 has given up the ghost and they need to send a crew to collect the body. He turned on his heel and began a fast walk back to the train. I got a little scared as the crowd shifted on their feet. Would they jump the conductor before he made his way to the lead train car? His eyes still looked fearful, though he did put on a tough face as he grimaced and snarled at me, as if all of this was my fault. The conductor ignored the restless town people and rushed toward the train to wait for the rescue operation from Portville. Yeah, pick on the young guy in the crowd with your dirty looks, I thought. When he reached the lead car, he quickly closed the door, and I heard the lock clank. The postman trotted back to his dusty little post office and didn't quite close the door all the way. People milled around for a few minutes, grumbling among themselves and spitting until they slowly began leaving the station to return to their boring lives. I'm sure, like me, they came to the station fascinated and curious, but now I could tell by the people's expression that the dying dragon and the grouchy conductor squeezed the excitement from the hearts of all who came. As some of the village people were departing, my father tramped down the hill. I scooted around behind the crowd, staying out of his line of sight. Chatting with old Joel, he got the gist of what had happened. Within a couple of minutes, there I was, exposed, no crowd to hide behind. I froze as he walked towards me. I could feel the anger like a hot stove in a cold room. What are you doing, Jaden? There's 2 more cows to be milked and goats to feed before you can even think about supper. Get on home. I almost talked back to him, but stopped myself just short of outright disobedience. Okay, but can't I stay a little longer? This poor dragon still breathes. My father gave the blue monster a hard look. It's breathing now much slower and weaker. What's the point? You want to adopt it and have it eat us out of house and home so you can have an oversized pet? For someone 15 years old, you can be so stupid. Let it die. It's the railroad's problem, not ours. But Dad, don't but Dad me, he roared. I've spoken. Now you get up the hill and finish your work. I knew better than to say any more, even giving my you can't make me look. With a quick glance back at the dragon, its eyes now shut and breathing much slower, I followed my father back to the ridge, to our small grazing fields and broken down barn. I picked up the overturned bucket, wiped the cold mud off, and headed for the trough to wash it before milking the 2 remaining cows of our tiny herd. I couldn't help but look back down to the center of town. In the aging night, the black form of the dying dragon was hardly visible on the tracks. Soon there would be only darkness in the heart of Hilltop and silence as the great lungs of the beast breathed their last. Okay, so ends the first chapter of Dragon Train. And it was recommended to me this might be a good time to stop and chat with any of you that are listening and maybe have questions or comments. So let me see if I can get myself to where I can see the chat situation. Excuse me while I flip something here I have on my screen. Okay, sorry about that. And now we go to, okay, and I see YouTube. Okay, so I believe if I make my screen big, okay. All right, so if there are any questions, I'm supposed to be able to see them on the screen here. All right, if not, there'll be somebody off camera that can help me. So any questions, any comments? I'll give you all a few moments.
Are you able to see the chat right now?
No, I can't.
Huh. Okay, well that's fine. I can read you the question. So
All right, sure.
first one up is, this is such an engaging reading. Do you have a background in theater and or voice work?
Uh-oh, I guess you caught me there. Of course, in high school, I loved speech and drama, participated in things like that. And then I had a minor in drama as well as a major in speech. And I ended up teaching for many, many years. I taught English, drama, speech, and so on. And so I hope I put my skills to good use today and so on. But yeah, that's part of it. And then also being a teacher, anytime that we had a discussion in class and maybe I was reading the selection and so on, I tried to read it just a little more with a little more interest than just dull voice, flat voice, and so on. So, yep, you caught me.
Okay, and the next one is, do you have any important fantasy influences? I'm especially curious what drew you to writing about dragons.
Okay, well, first of all, to the first part of that question, yeah, well, I think like almost everybody in the world that has read any kind of epic fantasy and so on, J.R.R. Tolkien was a big inspiration. In fact, I read him back in the days when there were some bootleg versions of the Lord of Rings out there and so on. And there was a big to-do about, which was the official published version and which was the after. And so I got very inspired by that. And then over the years, I've read many of the ones, especially dragon stories. I enjoyed many of those. And quite honestly, recently, as I was looking, as you can tell by the main character, that I'm looking at teen readers for this particular story, although I'm pretty sure it should be interesting to anybody who's interested in dragons and fantasy and so on. And I thought, okay, look at some of the books that are currently popular in the fantasy area. And I found, of course, a lot of werewolves, a lot of vampires and zombies and dragons. And I thought, okay, not so much the first one, but I do like dragons. And then that was about it. And so I thought, well, maybe someday some inspiration will hit me. And then one night I was almost asleep and just thinking about dragons. And suddenly the words dragon train came to me. And I thought, what? Dragon train? What could that be? And then I kind of went to sleep. Well, over the next few days, I started kind of looking into that and thinking about, well, if you had a dragon train story, what would happen? How would this work? And then, the story kind of came from there. And then, of course, I did a search to see, are there any other books called Dragon Train? And there really weren't, although there was one I found more recently, a few years ago, but it was a little instructional book for children. It wasn't a story. And I found there's been a lot of conflict. Sometimes when you do a Dragon Train search, you find How to Train Your Dragon, which is a very popular animated series. And so I've tried to make mine a little different by calling it Dragon Train and then the Dragon Train Quest and so on. And I have a Facebook page and I have a website with that title, Dragon Train Quest.
Oh, it looks like we just got a new question. So, why did you pick a blue dragon? I know there are other colors in the book, but why is the main one blue?
I like blue. And I had seen some artwork as I was developing the idea for the story and so on. I went to a site called Divergent Art, which is hundreds of artists from all over the world, maybe even thousands of artists. And I went to the fantasy section and then I found dragons and I went to that. And then I noticed there were a lot of blue dragons that really look cool. And so that got me to thinking, okay, so my main dragon is blue. And then I started thinking, well, what about them? Well, if they're going to be towing a train, they're going to be pretty big. And I thought it'll only be interesting if they're intelligent and can communicate with humans. But since they don't have the mouth and tongue and teeth for speech like people do, it'll be mental, at least with humans. And then as I developed that idea, I thought, well, there should be other dragons which come in a kind of a minor way later in the story. I have hopes of writing this as a series, this being the first book in the series, and there'll be other dragons come in. And so I thought, well, what are other interesting colors? And, silver and gold. And so I kind of went with that. But I just liked the blue dragons, the way they looked. And I found an artist that did some beautiful work that way. And so I contacted her online, and she's an artist by the name of, Celebril, and she lives in Europe. And so we communicated and I told her what I wanted, and she came up with this fantastic artwork that's behind me. And obviously I will be using her for the future editions of this series.
Okay, and that looks like it is about it for the questions. So we have a few minutes left for us, or for you to tell us about what you've got coming up next, where we can
Okay.
find you online. And if somebody else hops in with a question, I'll pop in and let you know. But other than that, it's your time to do the closer.
Okay. All right. Now, in the second chapter and the third and fourth chapters, very quickly, Jaden and the dragon, which, by the way, is named Sky, and it's Skye with an E at the end. And they head out for adventures because you can kind of tell this dragon is not quite done yet. It's not going to die. So that's a spoiler alert, but there it is. That's in the second chapter. You find that out. And it turns out that the dragon has been enslaved to tow these trains. It's not doing it by choice. And so the boy and the dragon head off on a quest for freedom and adventure. Now, in addition to this book, which obviously, as I said before, is for teen readers, and of course, anyone who loves dragons, I also wrote year before last, an award-winning book about an older couple and their granddaughters. They adopt a rescue dog. The book is titled Trixie Finds Her People and is filled with their adventures, fun, and challenges in both realistic and fantasy stories. The book is written for all ages from 8 to 108 who love dogs. A few years before that, I wrote a fantasy trilogy for grown-ups called the Rio Grande Parallax series. And I say grown-ups because there's some mature content, especially in the first part of the story. All three of the books were finalists in the New Mexico-Arizona Book Awards. The story is set in modern-day New Mexico and an ancient alternative in a magical New Mexico. And for those of you that may be international viewers, New Mexico is a state in the United States. A lot of people are familiar with Texas. Well, we're just west of Texas, south of Colorado, and east of Arizona. And it's mountainous and desert-like. And in this setting, that's an alternative to the modern day setting, I have a troubled man who travels through a portal to this alternative New Mexico to help the people of this ancient land fight a powerful and evil clan. However, it's about the last thing he wants to do. He's a very interesting character, to put it mildly. Now, you can learn more about my stories at my table here in the CorinCon's Artist Alley, and you'll find links to websites and how to buy books. Thank you very much for listening, and I believe my time is about out, so enjoy the rest of CorinCon 2021. This is RJ, the Story Guy, and I hope to see you again very soon. Bye.
Okay, that was awesome.